Astrid. She's psychotic. She's mysterious. She's sexy. Hey, it's Warm Fuzzy Blanket here, answering another question no one asked. Can you beat the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim using only Astrid? So I did have a pretty well-intentioned and reasonable rule set for this challenge. What I did not anticipate, however, was this challenge turning into an absolute clusterfuck very quickly. I also did not anticipate Astrid breaking the very rules that I had set, and so, for this reason, there are only a few guidelines I can give myself for this challenge. So, rule 1 is that I can only use Astrid to attack. Rule 2 is that I'm not allowed to use any weapons, armor, or any other form of magic, with the sole exception being what I will need to use to get and then maintain Astrid. So, is everyone clear and happy with the rules? No? Great, let's get started. So to start with, I created a high elf character, a man got his head cut off, a dragon showed up, and shit hit the fan after that. So initially, because I can't actually get Astrid until I leave Helgen, there's not really a lot that I can do. To that end, I am pretty much forced to just follow Hadvar through Helgen Keep, killing all of the Stormcloaks for me along the way. I harvested whatever supplies and materials I could find along the way, as well as taking the mage's robe and hood, as I was going to need a bit of extra magicka. Now I realise that I said I wouldn't be using any other spells or forms of magic, however, answers are coming. Once Hadvar had successfully dispatched the rest of the Stormcloaks and the Frostbite Spiders, I escaped out of Helgen. So the thing about survival mode is it will automatically halve the amount of weight that you can carry. I therefore had to drop a lot of the equipment that I'd acquired. I activated the Mage Stone, allowing my magicka skills to increase 20% faster. I then spoke to Alvar in Riverwood, took all of his supplies, and sold everything that I'd collected to the Riverwood trader. I then found a woodcutter's axe in Riverwood, which I used to chop a lot of firewood to sell to Hod. You see, the setup to actually get Astrid was not only quite time consuming, but rather expensive. I would need to acquire quite a vast amount of gold in order to do this legitimately as I'd intended. And with the constraints of survival mode being what they are, my character became very tired and very hungry very quickly. Now thankfully, because I was acquiring gold, I was actually able to afford a room and food for the night in order to maintain myself while I chopped. And once I was sure that I did indeed have enough gold gathered up, I raided all of the local produce from Riverwood in order to make cabbage soup. I then ran to Riverwood, caught a carriage to Winterhold, entered the College of Winterhold, and began to steal everything I possibly could. I was actually able to find some warm clothing here, which will definitely help when I'm out in the cold, and it's allowed because it's not actually armour. Within the College of Winterhold, I met a man called Phineas Jester, and I hope you're all sitting very comfortably because holy f***, this is going to take some explaining. Began by asking him to train me in conjuration using the gold that I'd acquired. After I'd been trained 1 point in conjuration, I then stole back the gold. I then bought more conjuration training and then stole back the gold again. You see, in order to do what I'm planning, I need a conjuration skill of 100, and this is one of the simplest ways to do that. You see, by paying for conjuration training and then stealing back the gold, I wasn't losing any money, but my conjuration skill was increasing. Once I had gained enough skills, I was able to sleep in a bed in Winterhold and level up, and every time I would level up, I would increase my magicka. Problem with doing this is that my pickpocket skill was also increasing, and so by the time I'd hit level 13, my conjuration skill was at level 50. By this point, I found that I could no longer afford to continue with my training, however I did sink all of the points that I could into the conjuration tree. I was going to need the master conjuration spells to be as powerful and as cost effective in terms of magicka as possible. Therefore, my plan was to lure wild animals into Winterhold in the hope that the guards would take them out for me. By doing so, I'd hoped, at least, that I would be able to then use the soul trap spell on it repeatedly, and begin to power level my conjuration even higher. And I actually died quite a few times trying to get this to actually work, or trying to get the wild beast to actually follow me. Eventually I was able to lure a saber cat into Winterhold where the guards cut it down for me, I could now use my soul trap spell on it to increase my conjuration. And then I could simply use the wait command to regenerate my magicka and continue. This worked reasonably well for a time until some hired thugs showed up and tried to kill me. It also seemed that no one in Winterhold was actually willing to help me here, however my friends the mages would. Now as it turns out, this was actually beneficial because the hired thugs were cut down right outside of the College of Winterhold, which meant I was actually able to use my soul trap spell on the dead hired thugs and then use the wait command next to the blue fire, and I would not take the cold debuff. This allowed me to safely and effectively power level my conjuration skill even higher. And as I leveled up, I continued to increase my magicka and pouring more perks into the conjuration tree. Once I had hit level 90, however, there was something else I was required to do. You see, in order to get the spell that I actually required, I would first have to pass a test from Phineas. I would have to summon an unbound remora. Now, once you summon the unbound remora, it will attempt to kill you. To this end, I was forced to run back inside the Mages Guild and let the mages take care of it. I would then have to summon the remora again, and then let the mages kill it again. On the third attempt, I was able to convince it that I am in fact its master, and it gave me a sigil stone. After I returned this to Phineas, he gave me the spell that I wanted. Or at least, he let me buy the spell that I wanted, which was Dead Thrall. Once I had the Dead Thrall spell and a conjuration skill of 100, I was finally ready to get Astrid. But not before a challenger decided to kill me 2 times in Winterhold. I swear to God, no one in Winterhold actually wants to help me. After reloading for a third and final time, the challenger was no longer there and I was able to run all the way down to Windhelm. No, I'm just joking, I got killed by wild animals. I managed to make it on one of my attempts by taking as many potions as I could, and I only just survived the cold, making it safely into Windhelm. You see, in order to acquire Astrid, I'm first going to have to start the Dark Brotherhood questline. So I spoke to Aventus Arantino, a troubled little orphan who wanted me to go kill Grelod the Kind. Grelod the Kind is the head of an orphanage in Riften. Sounds like a really f***ed up version of Annie. So after catching the carriage to Riften, I used whatever this wrestling move is called on Grelod the Kind. Once the deed was done, I caught a carriage back to Windhelm and reported to Aventus, telling him that I'd killed Grelod. I then caught a carriage back to Whiterun and began chopping wood to get some more money, as well as buying some more food and supplies. I was doing this because I had to wait for the courier to give me a mysterious note saying, "We know." Then, after sleeping in Whiterun, I found myself awakening in a very strange and unfamiliar place. At long last, I had finally found her. Well, technically she found me, but same difference. After you awaken, Astrid will ask you to kill one of the 3 people located within the shack that she has also kidnapped. But I'm not here for them. I'm here for her. If I said I was able to kill Astrid without turning down the difficulty, I would be lying, because holy f***, she is powerful. Now, in my initial rule set, I had kind of had the idea that I wasn't going to mess with Astrid in any way, give her better weapons, change her armor, anything like that that could potentially make her stronger or weaker. Astrid will later go on to break this rule, but we'll come to that. So, as it turns out, Astrid's AI pathfinding is pretty damn terrible. She doesn't like water. However, she is actually strong enough to survive on her own out in the wilderness. After I'd run back to Solitude, I caught a carriage to Whiterun, and Astrid had followed me. After I'd rested and resupplied myself in Whiterun, it was time to head up to speak to Jarl Balgroove to actually get this game started. After speaking to Farengar, the court jester, he instructed me to go to Bleak Falls Barrow and acquire the Dragonstone tablet. I was accosted by a thief on the way back to Riverwood, and this is the first real time we're going to see Astrid in action. So as it turns out, Argonians are weak to a dagger in the face. She dealt with the odd wolf as we made our way up to Bleak Falls Barrow until we came across a frost troll. So to begin with, she actually dealt with it rather well, getting it down to about half health before she eventually died. I then had to resurrect her. However, in the time wasted in which she died, the frost troll began to regenerate health. She actually came very close to finishing this fight before she died again. Okay, let's reload and try that again. Now, on the second attempt, she actually performed a lot better. However, she did decide to run away at one point, as if the frost troll couldn't see her. Don't really know what was going on, but she did manage to kill him, and that's the important part. She also gracefully cut her way through the bandits outside of Bleak Falls Barrow. Now, Astrid is actually performing reasonably well so far. However, this is early days, and things are going to get a lot harder. Once we'd got inside Bleak Falls Barrow, she took out both of the bandits at the start. I was then able to sleep and recover. And since I can't actually heal in this challenge, sleeping is my main source of recovery. She took out the wounded frostbite spider with relative ease, and after we cut down Arvil the Swift, he decided to run off and get himself killed, probably waking up every Draugr in the barrow. Now, because I'm a higher level, it's much more common now that I will come across Restless Draugr and Draugr Wights as opposed to the standard Draugr. And it's here that I really began to see the shortcomings of Astrid. After she died, I discovered I had a huge problem. You see, I have to cast the Dead Thrall spell uninterrupted. If I am hit by an enemy, it will stop the spell and I will have wasted all of that time and magicka. I actually didn't have enough time to resurrect Astrid here. Luckily, there is a trap gate that I could use to take care of this Restless Draugr, and then I could bring Astrid back to life. Another thing to mention here is that not only will Astrid not recover health, but I can't heal her. So once I revive her, I think she's pretty much at full health until she dies. Astrid then fell for a second time, and as I did not have time to revive her, I too was cut down. This happened for a second time. On my third attempt, I thought to actually just charge the spell in preparation for her dying, except she didn't die this time. I met another frost troll inside the barrow, and luckily, because they are in fact quite slow, I was able to just slip round the side of the cliffs, and then had plenty of time to just revive Astrid. Only she decided that she would much prefer to run away and let the frost troll whittle down her health. She then died for a second time. So, for whatever reason, Astrid seemed unable to take out the frost troll, so I just said F this and proceeded on through the cave. She then got killed by a Draugr Wight, and I knew that I didn't have time to resurrect her, so I would have to head back through the cave and lure the Draugr Wight far enough away from her so that I could run back and resurrect her. The only problem was that once I did this, the frost troll followed me, so now we had the Draugr Wight and the frost troll to deal with. And this is where I really began to see just how difficult this challenge is actually going to be. So I had the idea to simply resurrect Astrid and then run through to the next area before anything could kill her. She handled the rest of the barrow relatively well, and after I'd solved the Dora the Explorer puzzle, we made it through to the room with the stone. She managed to get the Draugr Deathlord down to about half health before she actually died. I then had to run around the room a few times to distract him, giving me enough time to resurrect her. And after only one resurrection, she'd actually managed to beat down the Draugr Deathlord, and I claimed the stone of Bleak Falls Barrow.
Listen, hear me and obey.
Oh great, I'm hearing voices now. After leaving Bleak Falls Barrow, I headed back to Whiterun to rest, recover, buy some supplies, and sell all of the junk that I'd acquired so far. After reporting back to Farengar, the court jester, it was time to go and fight a dragon that was attacking the western watchtower. Now, normally I'd just like to hide inside the watchtower and let the guards take care of this dragon. However, I really wanted to see what Astrid could actually do here. Now, I am assuming that she must have been on pretty low health here because she actually went the rest of the fight without dying again, even while taking full blasts of fire in the face. I'm also pretty certain that Astrid was the one to get the final hit on the dragon, which is pretty cool. After the dragon was killed, I returned to Jarl Balgruuf, who advised I climb the 7,000 steps up to High Hrothgar. And this is where I had quite a serious concern. You see, I bought a horse, which I was planning to ride up to High Hrothgar because it's quicker. I expected the problem with this to be that If Astrid can't keep up with me, and she dies somewhere out there in the wilderness, I will probably never find her. At the same time, I didn't want to handhold an NPC with terrible pathfinding up the 7,000 steps. So, to see what would happen, I rode to Iverstad and used the wait command to see if Astrid would appear beside me, and she did. After sleeping in Iverstad, myself and Astrid began to head up the 7,000 steps to High Hrothgar. We were immediately accosted by a black bear, and after the bear had finished chewing up and spitting out Astrid, it turned on me. I then managed to get myself up onto a high cliff where the bear couldn't reach me. After Astrid had been killed, I attempted to revive her from here, but unfortunately I missed. So I reloaded, and I missed again, and again. When I did finally get her back up and running again, she managed to take down the bear, and we could continue up the 7,000 steps. We came across the odd ice wraith, but nothing too major, and Astrid was able to take it out with very little difficulty. That is until we came up across the next frost troll. You see, Astrid was doing okay against it, getting it down to about half health. Then she would die, and by the time I'd resurrected Astrid, its health had regenerated significantly. I once again tried the technique of hiding where the frost troll couldn't get me, and then resurrecting Astrid, hoping this would work, but for some reason this frost troll is just OP. So how I eventually managed to deal with this frost troll was get it to attack me, or at least chase me, all the way to High Hrothgar. With Astrid still alive, I knew that she would appear inside of High Hrothgar with me, but I didn't expect the frost troll to come. And thankfully the Greybeards actually took it out for me. Now that I was safely in the company of the Greybeards, they taught me a few words of power before asking me to retrieve the horn of Jurgen Windcaller. I decided that it would probably be best if I just abandon Astrid completely and scale the side of the mountain down High Hrothgar. This is pretty easy to do without taking too much damage. Once I'd got to the bottom, I returned to Whiterun and caught a carriage to Marthal. I was pretty tired and hungry by the time I got to Marthal, so I ate some food and rested, only to find that some cultists were waiting for me outside. Not to worry, however, because the Marthal guard will help with this fight. Astrid was actually killed, and it took me quite a while to find her. Once I had found her, I resurrected her and began to head to Ustengrav on my horse. She actually made extremely short work of the necromancers both outside and inside the entrance of Ustengrav. I did, however, take quite a bit of damage, but luckily there is a bedroll just outside, so I could use this to sleep and recover my health. After the Draugr White had finished with the necromancers, he turned his attention on Astrid and killed her again. Fortunately, I did have enough time to revive her, and we cleared the rest of the room. I then headed back outside to sleep and recover once again, before heading back in to deal with more restless Draugr. And to be totally honest, Astrid cut her way through Ustengrav like an absolute champ. I made sure to pick up the Become Ethereal shout because I like to use it for getting down High Hrothgar. However, in the area with the frostbite spiders, I had serious difficulty. You see, the whole floor is one giant fire trap. If I stand on it, I'm going to get hit by fire, or Astrid will, or the spiders will. My plan therefore was to simply lure the spiders back the way I came, hoping that they would take fire damage from the floor traps. Eventually Astrid was killed, however I was able to revive her. And once she had taken out the rest of the frostbite spiders, I acquired the horn of Jurgen Windcaller, except I didn't because it had already been stolen. Now that I was out of Ustengrav, I ran all the way to Solitude to sell all of the junk that I had acquired and buy as many potions as I could, resting and recovering before catching a carriage back to Whiterun. From there, I ran all the way to Riverwood. I spoke to Delphine, the name of the woman who left the mysterious note inside of Ustengrav. It turns out that she's a blade and she wants me to prove that I'm a dragonborn by killing a dragon in Kynesgrove. To be honest, we've taken down 2 dragons so far, so personally I don't believe I have to prove jack shit to her, but there you go. Now in this dragon fight, you actually have Delphine as well as Astrid, so the odds are kinda stacked in my favour, especially when you consider that Delphine can't actually be killed. Naturally, of course, Astrid did die at one point, but I was able to resurrect her once again, and we took down this dragon. And I say this dragon for a very good reason. You see, after speaking to Delphine, the plan was to meet her back in Riverwood. Okay, we'll just go to Windhelm and then catch a carriage there, right? Except another dragon appeared the second we had killed the first one. And with this dragon, not only did we not have help from Delphine, but Astrid really wasn't playing ball here. See, for some reason, and I'm still not sure why, Astrid was deciding to run away and hide sometimes. Meanwhile, the dragon has other targets in Kynesgrove that it can attack. Unfortunately, Astrid will not follow me until this dragon is dead, which means I can't ignore it. And, of course, the only thing Astrid likes more than hiding from the fight she's supposed to be taking part in is actually dying. This was extremely frustrating to bear witness to because it wasn't a necessary fight and it wasn't anything we really had to do. Eventually, when her and the rest of the citizens of Kynesgrove actually killed the dragon, I ran back to Windhelm, caught a carriage to Whiterun, and then ran all the way to Riverwood. I sold near enough all of the junk that I'd collected, as well as a few of the dragon bones that had been weighing me down. I then decided to buy some potions and some food. Delphine then explained to me that she had this crazy idea about getting me into the Thalmor Embassy to try and discover the secret as to where these dragons were coming from. In order to do this, I met with her agent, Malborn the Mule, and shoved all of my equipment inside his rectal cavity for him to smuggle it into the Thalmor Embassy for me. Once I had arrived at the embassy, I spent a bit of time looking around for Astrid, only to find that she was outside of the gate. I considered this to be a problem until she somehow teleported inside of the gate. After raiding all of the food from the Thalmor Embassy reception, I noticed one very important thing. Astrid was not with me. Now, I believe this is because the game developers intended you to do this alone. Not to worry, however, because I have a plan. How I actually got around Astrid not being able to get into the embassy was I used one of the perks that I had to take the first point of stealth, making it 20% easier to remain undetected. I then ran through to the courtyard of the embassy and used the wait command, and Astrid was teleported to me. I then released the full fury of the Dark Brotherhood on the Altmerry Dominion. I quickly found that dealing with multiple targets at a time would not be a good idea, as Astrid would just end up getting killed way too easily. However, if I could head back inside, I could lure one of the soldiers at a time, which Astrid could deal with very easily. And on the odd occasion that she was killed, I was actually able to revive her with relative ease. Now, sadly, this did not mean that the Thalmor were completely ignoring me. On the contrary, I was getting hit quite regularly with spells. But thanks to all of the potions that I had shoved up Malborn's arse, I was able to keep myself alive just long enough for Astrid to take out all of the guards. Getting the interrogation chamber key, I headed through to the next area where Astrid dispatched all of the guards for me, and I was able to get the dossier on Esbern. And thankfully, Astrid was able to display the unyielding and relenting force of the Dark Brotherhood. With everything inside the embassy now wrapped up in a neat little package, I completely ignored the Frost Troll and got the hell out of there. Upon leaving the Thalmor Embassy, I attempted to catch a carriage from Solitude. Unfortunately, however, I forgot one important thing. I don't have any money. Not to worry, however, because I had enough junk that I could sell in Solitude to get the funds to get back home. Or at least back to Delphine, where I could get the rest of my equipment. It seems that she has another task for me. She now wants me to find Esbern. I swear to God I spend more of this game running back and forward than anything else. I sold the rest of the junk that I'd acquired in Riverwood before heading back to Whiterun and catching a carriage to Riften. I knew that Esbern was located inside the Ratway, so I headed in there with Astrid, and we were immediately accosted by a few bandits. So I sent Astrid off to slit their throats, and she did reasonably well, but she did end up dying before the last bandit was killed. I tried to resurrect her, but I missed, so I had to reload and try again. I don't know how I missed it point blank range, but that's going to be a theme going forward. I had to take quite a few health potions on my way to getting the fist, as there was quite a few traps on the floor that I took quite a bit of damage from. But Astrid managed to cut her way through him like a knife through squib jelly. Leave a like if you get the reference. In fact, you know what? Leave a like if you don't get the reference. So while heading through the Ratway to Esbern, you are once again accosted by the Altmerry Dominion, and I was very nearly killed by some lightning. However, it was actually a good thing that they were attacking me instead of Astrid, because it just gave her free attacks. Once I'd caught up with the crazy old coot known as Esbern, I now had 2 allies with me. Esbern can't be killed, and Astrid can be resurrected. Getting out of here was really no problem. Once we had returned to Riverwood, Esbern said that he would very much like to go to Alduin's wall. Catching a carriage to Markarth, I headed on foot towards Skyhaven Temple because I know that there is a dragon there as well as Forsworn, and I didn't want my horse to get killed. I also ignored everything and just headed straight inside Skyhaven Temple. Because I now have Esbern, Delphine, and Astrid with me, this fight was really not an issue. Indeed, the Blades didn't even seem to question or care why I have the leader of the Dark Brotherhood following me around. Not gonna lie though, I think Delphine was a little bit jealous, but she was hiding it well. After we learned the secrets of Alduin's wall and the dragon shout to bring down Alduin, it was time to head back to see the Greybeards. So I now had to run back to Markarth, catch a carriage to Whiterun, and then run all the way up to High Hrothgar. They were less than pleased, shall we say, as to how long it took me to actually get back to them with the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller, but they did provide me with a shout to head to the top of the mountain and meet their leader, Parthenax. I was met with a few ice wraiths along the way, and I knew these had to die, and they had to die with Astrid still alive, because I couldn't leave her up here, otherwise I would never find her again. Once I'd made it to the top of the mountain, I spoke to Parthenax, who told me I would require an Elder Scroll in order to learn the Dragonren shout. So I headed back down the mountain to Whiterun and caught a carriage back to Winterhold in the hope that I could learn from the mages anything about an Elder Scroll. But of course, there's another f***ing dragon. Oh, look at that, I'm dead. Great. Now, I had hoped to lure the dragon to the College of Winterhold so that the mages would kill him, but they were taking far too long about it, so I just headed inside the library and got the information I needed on the Elder Scroll. Once I had the information that I needed, I thought I could actually just head outside and finish off the blood dragon. After a long and arduous fight, however, Astrid managed to get the dragon down to pretty much one hit and it was dead. And then she died. And then I died. So after reloading, I rested at the College of Winterhold. I then used the Become Ethereal shout to jump down the cliff and head straight for Septimus Signius's camp. Now, he is located in a glacier to the far north, and it is extremely cold up here. Even the water will cause you significant damage. And remember at the start where I said this challenge was an absolute clusterfuck? Well, this is one of the reasons why. You see, I'm now trapped in the frozen north, and the cold debuff is significantly hurting me and slowing me down. Not to mention, I also have an Astrid to look after. Initially, I had tried running back to Winterhold in order to recover and warm up, but I ended up getting killed by a bear. I then tried to head a more central route, but got killed by some skeletons. Now, if I was to show you just how long it took me to actually get out of here, it would actually take me all day. It actually took me a lot of attempts before I managed to find a warm spot where I could actually use the wait command. This would allow me to warm up and bring Astrid to me. And from here I was able to make it back to Winterhold, where I headed inside the inn to warm up further and recover completely. But of course, there was still that blood dragon to take care of. I realised that there was no way out of here through killing the dragon because, well, Astrid would not ignore it, so it was time to stand and fight. I know this because I actually did try riding away on my horse at one point in the hope that Astrid would follow me, but she didn't. Once again, I had to rely on my strategy of lure the dragon to the mages. Of course, then the dragon seemed to get bored with me and headed back into Winterhold, where he was eventually taken down by the guards and the citizens. I then had to look for and revive Astrid before heading off finally to Alfrund. I was reasonably confident that I could just leave Astrid behind and ride straight there. I felt like I could probably just rely on this bed to heal if I needed to. I always find Jadar to be quite challenging, and this was no exception. He fought with Astrid for quite some time before eventually killing her. I tried to lure him away so that this would give me enough time to revive her, but he did end up killing me. Thankfully I quick-saved, and so after reloading I tried again with a bit more success. She then managed to take him down without too much trouble. We then had an attempt at dealing with the Dwemospheres with very little to no success, and it was apparent that Astrid was not actually strong enough to take these things down. So unfortunately, I had to take the coward's way out and just run through this next area. I managed to make it safely through to the next area before Astrid was actually killed, so she was still with me. However, in this next section, she got attacked by Dwemospiders and Dwemospheres. And as it turns out, Astrid is actually strong enough to take down Dwemospheres as long as she's fighting just one and nothing else. So the next area kind of spirals down and you're expected to fight a lot of Thalmor along the way. I, however, just decided to use the Become Ethereal shout and fall all the way to the bottom, making it through the door to the next room. When I entered this next area, Astrid was with me, but for some reason she was dead. I really don't know why, but it doesn't matter because I just revived her. And it became very clear that we did not have the firepower to deal with all the Thalmor and the Dwarven Centurion in this next area, so I just skipped the lot of it. Once I'd made it safely into Blackreach, my initial plan was to do what I always do and just run through here because you don't have to do anything, except that Astrid kept getting killed, so I would have to supervise her. It was at this point that I realised that she'd broken the rules that I'd set. You see, initially when I went into this, I decided that I wouldn't be altering Astrid in any way. However, once she died and I went to resurrect her, I realised something very important. She didn't have the Blade of War anymore and she was using a different dagger. This means that for whatever reason, she decided to drop or she lost the Blade of War and picked up something else. I then realised that this rule had been compromised and quite frankly was never achievable, so I disregarded it and gave her a Dwarven battle axe. I also took off her hood and mask so that you guys can see her beautiful face, but I still haven't decided if I'm going mask on or mask off for the thumbnail. I guess we'll find out. After she had taken down the initial Dwemosphere, I ran to the end of Blackreach, and to my surprise Astrid hadn't actually been killed, so I think it was the initial Dwemosphere that was killing her, but either way we managed to claim the Elder Scroll. So now that I had actually decided that I could change Astrid's equipment, I decided to buy a bow and some arrows as I felt this would really help with fighting dragons. I then headed back to the Time Wound at the top of High Hrothgar, went back in time and learned the Dragon Wren shout. Once the cutscene was over and I'd been returned to my original time, I noticed a very big problem. Now I had been really hoping to avoid this. You see, I don't know why, but for some reason Astrid is 1, dead, and 2, naked. You see, the main reason I hadn't changed Astrid's armor was because I assumed that because she's dead, once I take it off, she won't re-equip it, which meant basically I had to keep her in the armor she originally started from. But the Alduin fight went extremely well. I used Dragon Wren to bring him to the ground and then just kind of hid round the corner and let Astrid hack away at him. Obviously Paarthurnax is also there to distract him, and when Dragon Wren run out I just used it again. And when Astrid did die, I just allowed Alduin to fly away. This gave me enough safety to revive her and then continue the fight. Don't get me wrong though, I did get hit by rocks on my first attempt, and then that wasted a lot of magic, so then I had to take some more potions of healing and magicka in order to try again. After I had revived her, she did continue to fight valiantly, but eventually was killed again, but reviving her really isn't too much of a trouble. All in all, this fight really wasn't as difficult as I'd anticipated, and it gave me great hope for the rest of the run. After I defeated Alduin, I spoke to the Greybeards, and it seemed that my next task was to trap a dragon. In order to do this, I would first have to end the civil war. Now, on survival mode, this involves travelling all across Skyrim, speaking to General Tullius and Jarl Ulfric, trying to get them to come up to a peace negotiation. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I completely zoned out here and just began listening to Screamo while they talked. However, Astrid suddenly died for some reason. Now, I'm not sure if it's because the developers intend you to be here alone. Not really sure what's going on, but she was easy enough to revive anyway. Once I had indeed ended the civil war, I trapped the dragon in Dragon's Reach and flew off to Skuldafn. Only there was one serious problem. Astrid wasn't here. So once I realised that she wasn't in fact coming with me, I did a little bit of research into this and discovered that this is the way the developers intended it. You are supposed to do Skuldafn and Sovngarde alone. So initially, this is what I attempted to do. However, I fell short at the first puzzle because, well, there are too many Draugr around and I can't survive the attacks. So now I had a moral dilemma. Do I just accept defeat, or do I console command her into Skuldafn? Then I thought, you know what, no, that would be disingenuous. It wouldn't be right. Yeah, so anyway, me and Astrid immediately got attacked by a dragon upon landing at Skuldafn. Well, I first actually had to kill her again because console commanding only brings her back alive, and then I had to give her all of her old equipment. But Astrid actually still wasn't powerful enough to take on any of the dragons outside of Skuldafn, so I just kind of ran inside. So once inside Skuldafn, the primary enemy I was dealing with would be the Draugr White. Astrid did have a lot of trouble in here fighting these things. But for whatever reason, she really seemed to struggle initially, and then as we progressed further on, she just started smashing everything up. I mean, yeah, sure, I had to resurrect her from time to time, but that was nothing new, and I seemed to have an easier time doing it too. There did come a point in Skuldafn where she just became an unstoppable force. I realised that the only safe way to actually get through this was if we could deal with one enemy at a time. Even when fighting the Draugr White Lord in order to get the Ebony Claw, she still managed to do this with very little trouble. Don't get me wrong, it took 4 attempts, but it got done relatively easy. And to be honest, it only took so many attempts because of AI issues. Astrid either running away or letting herself be killed, but generally she was able to keep up with the Draugr White Lord. And you don't actually have to fight and kill the Dragon Priest in order to enter Skuldafn. If you're quick enough, you can simply just run and jump into the portal. But this does create another problem. So I once again had to console command her back in and then kill her. So with Astrid number 3, it was time to fight Sun. Now, I'm not joking, and I really don't have time to show this, but this took about an hour and a half and 13 attempts to finish. Now this is chiefly due to the fact that I accidentally had the difficulty on Master, but that was my fault. You see, I had to turn it down to Novice so that I could actually kill her, to revive her, to get her back onto my squad. I then accidentally put the difficulty up to Master, and that's why it actually took so long. Once I realised this, I put it back down to Adept, and she handled Sun extremely well. Which, by the way, raises another question. You see, to my understanding, game difficulty affects NPCs. Therefore, if I put it up to Master difficulty, Astrid should have gotten stronger as well as Sun. The difficulty shouldn't actually matter. And then this happened. Like, this was the Alduin fight. I honestly don't know what the fuck is going on here. Like, there's just no way Astrid is that powerful. Like, seriously, there's no way. She really struggled the first time against Alduin. Well, she didn't really struggle, but it wasn't this easy. Although, come to think of it, I do have 4 NPCs attacking Alduin, but you know what, f it, I don't care. We beat Skyrim using only Astrid. Okay, so I've kind of had this idea that I would quite like to start a series where I run through Skyrim with different NPCs like Astrid, kind of rate them, see how they do, maybe on a scale from like S to F rank or something like that. I really learned a lot from this first attempt of doing something like this with Astrid, and I learned a lot about the game mechanics as well. I'd also like to apologise that I haven't put a challenge out in about 2 months now. I've had quite a lot going on, but I'm definitely going to get back on schedule. And I'd just like to thank you all so much for your continued support and feedback. If you guys do want to see more videos like this, I could even do something like this with Oblivion. It would probably be easier. Then let me know in the comments. And finally, I'd just like to thank you again for watching today. Please like, subscribe and all that good stuff. Leave any comments if you do have any, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.